Adam, do you know the defendant in this case?
Yes, I do.
How do you know him?
Past run-ins, friends with his kid's mom.
You sit forward a little bit, speak up. I'm having a difficult time, and the jury may be as well.
I know him through his kid's mom. I've sat in jail with him, seen him a few times on the streets.
Okay. And I want to talk to you about a time that you saw the defendant back in September of 2011. Do you recall an occasion where you saw him?
Yes, I do.
And where was that at?
I was on a mutual friend's porch,
And who was that friend?
Sandy Tim.
And did you have some discussion with him that related to the disappearance that was known at that point in time of Stephanie Lowe?
Yes, I did.
How did that discussion take place?
He'd asked me about, when we were in jail prior to that, he had seen one of my pictures of an older vehicle. In the background it showed a swamp on some land that my parents owned.
And by the way, let's stop a second. Where was the land that your parents owned that had the swamp?
In Monument County.
Okay, all right. So continue.
He asked me if I remembered the picture, and then he asked how deep the swamp was.
Did you have some further discussion with him then about why he was asking about how deep the swamp was?
Yes, I did.
And what was that? What did he say?
Something about he needed to put hands there.
Did he say why he had to put hands there?
There's DNA underneath the nails.
And did he make clear whose hands had the DNA under the nails?
He made pretty clear, yes.
And whose hands were these?
Stephanie Lowe's.
Did he say anything else about why he wanted to put the hands in the swamp?
He didn't want his DNA to be found.
Did he tell you why he was concerned that the hands and his DNA may be found at that point?
I can't remember.
Okay, that's fine. Did you have any other contact with him about the Stephanie Lowe matter?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall one that took place a couple months later in November of 2011?
In the county jail.
And what happened in that contact in November of 2011?
I can't remember specifics. It's been a long time.
Did he say anything about any case that there might be against him at that point in time?
He was worried about being charged with the motor case. He said, no body, no motive.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the witness.
He said that he was worried about being charged with the motor case, and he said without the body, there is no motive.
No motive?
Do you see the individual who you had these conversations with here in court?
Yes, I do.
Could you point him up or where he's seated and what he's wearing?
Over there, striped short.
Has the record reflect the identification of the defendant, Your Honor?
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't have any other questions for Mr. Smith.
Russ? Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Smith. You are longtime friends with a woman named Rebecca Torgerson, correct?
Not really a long time. I've known her since 2010, but sporadically on and off.
Okay. So when you had this conversation that you testified at Sandy Tim's residence, I have that right, the first conversation?
Yes, sir.
You knew Rebecca Torgerson prior to that time?
Yes.
Okay. And prior to that time, you knew her at least to the extent that she sold you some property, right?
Yes.
What'd she sell you?
Drugs and also a Cadillac.
I really want to ask about the Cadillac, but it's fine. Okay. And prior to your, when you claim you met Mr. Torgerson at Miss Tim's house, was Rebecca Torgerson there?
Yes, she was.
And were drugs being used that instance?
Drugs were being sold at that instance.
Okay. Were you utilizing drugs that day? Using drugs that day?
Later on in the day I did, yes.
After your conversation with Mr. Torgerson?
Yes, I don't use why I was conducting business, so I was selling at the time, so I couldn't be using.
Understood. So, before this date at Miss Tim's residence, did you socialize with Rebecca Torgerson?
On and off.
For about, would it be for roughly a year, 2009? Or you put a time frame on it?
Yeah, it's something like that.
During the time frame that you socialized with Rebecca Torgerson before the visit to Sandy Tim's house, to her, where you also saw Kristopher Torgerson, did you discuss the Stephanie Lowe homicide investigation with Rebecca Torgerson?
No.
Did Rebecca Torgerson talk to you about it at all?
No. We weren't on them type of terms. It was more of a business type thing.
Did you ever tell law enforcement that Rebecca Torgerson once told you, quote, "I know he killed her. That is why he should not be around my kids," quit quote? Did you ever tell law enforcement that Rebecca said that to you?
Yes, I did.
Okay. When did Rebecca say that to you?
That would have been, I can't remember.
What we call a probation hold, right?
Yes.
Prior to that date, you had learned about the Stephanie Lowe investigation through the media?
No, I had a conversation with him before that I was in jail, so I guess, I don't know, it was all over the place.
I'm talking about before you met with the police on October 16, 2011 for the first time about your testimony. You with me?
Yeah.
Before that time, you had learned some information about the investigation, correct?
I had learned that she was missing.
When you got into the jail on or about October 1, 2011, people in the jail were talking about the case, right?
I guess. I don't really talk to too many people in there.
I'm not asking you to guess about anything.
I don't know.
Well, let me see if this might refresh your recollection. Were you in the jail at that time with a fella by the name of Tyshawn Meeks? T-Y-S-H-U-N?
Your Honor, I guess I'm going to object to this line of question. Whether people in the jail were talking about it or not is hearsay, and I object to hearsay.
I'm not asking for the content of the statement. I'm asking who he spoke to about the case as it may affect what he revealed to police on October 16, 2011. The source of his information. If he says it's not these people, so be it. But I'm entitled to ask. I believe.
Okay. It would appear to be hearsay.
Even if I'm not asking for the content of the statement.
Then I don't know what the relevance is.
I explain the relevance. As it relates to what he told the police subsequent to the conversation.
Okay, is there an objection?
Yeah, the relevance and it's hearsay.
Let's sustain the objection.
Are there things called press conferences in jails amongst inmates?
I don't know.
Never heard that?
Press conference is something you have with the news, I could thought.
I'm just asking whether you engage in any press conferences within the jail, not what you typically
No.
do. Okay. when you're in the jail on this probation hold, you're 2 weeks in, when you contact jail staff and say, I want to talk to the police about something, right?
Yes.
Now, that's not the first time. And that happened on October 16, 2011, when you tell a jailer, I want to talk to some police, right?
Yes.
That's not the first time over the years that you asked law enforcement to speak with them so you can cooperate on other cases for a benefit, correct? That's the first time.
I guess. Yes.
So, I'm not
Yes.
asking you to guess. Stop this. October 16, 2011 wasn't the first time that you've contacted law enforcement when in custody because you want to talk and give information in exchange for a benefit, correct?
Correct.
It's happened before.
Yes.
How many times?
Once or twice.
Once or twice?
Yes.
How close in? Write that. Okay. And when you make the request to speak to law enforcement, a police officer, a fellow by the name of Max Laporte, meets you in the booking area, Laporte, meets you in the booking area and say, what do you want? Right?
Yep.
And you say, I want to talk in private. Right?
Yes.
You are transported from the Wausau County Jail, the Marathon County Jail, to the Wausau Police Department, right?
Yes.
And at this time, you sit down with Officer Laporte, and you're joined by a detective at that time, now a captain by the name of Matthew Barnes, right?
Yes.
And you're aware that the interview that's going to be conducted of you is going to be recorded.
Yes.
But prior to the recording, tell me if you remember this, you said to Officer Laporte, look, I want some consideration for this, right?
I don't remember.
Do you remember asking Officer Laporte and Detective Barnes if your probation hold could be dropped?
Actually, I do remember that, and that would be a joke because no cop can get a probation hold dropped.
So you were kidding.
Yes. There ain't no cop, no one that can get a probation officer to drop a hold. That is through Madison, and Madison don't give a crap if you help out or not. If you're on a hold, you're on a hold. That's it.
So when you asked Officer Laporte and Detective Barnes if your probation hold could be dropped, you were joking.
Yes.
Did they laugh?
Actually, I believe one of them did laugh and said we don't have that type of power.
Do you remember that on the contrary, that then Lieutenant Barnes said to you that the Wausau Police Department would explain to the Wisconsin Division of Community Corrections, the probation department, about your cooperation, and they can take appropriate action in your favor. As opposed to them laughing, remember law enforcement saying, that to you, sir?
Well, I guess I'm going to object, Your Honor, to the form, because if he's reading from the report of Officer Laporte, it says they can take whatever action, not appropriate action. So it's a distinction that I think is important. So I object to the form of the question because he's misreading the report.
Sustained.
Tell me whether you remember this. I don't want to misread anything.
Page 958, counsel.
I have it in my hand, sir.
Third paragraph.
I'm looking at it with my eyes right now. Lieutenant, tell me if you remember the sequence of events during this joking period of time.
I'm not a lieutenant. You just call me lieutenant.
Tell me if you recall this series of events, sir. Lieutenant Lieutenant Barnes during this joking period. Lieutenant Barnes came into the interview room at this point and explained to Adam, we do not have the ability to request probation and parole to lift his probation hold. Do you remember that during the joking period?
Yeah.
And do you remember Lieutenant Barnes then communicating, but we can explain to them the cooperation and the information he provided, and they can take whatever action they feel is needed based on that information, correct? Do you remember Lieutenant Barnes saying that?
Don't remember exactly what was said, but like I said, what I said was in a joking manner, so pretty much everyone knows that no one can get you off probation hold. So,
but we do know that in one or two prior instances, you were speaking with the police for a benefit, right? We know that, right?
yes.
Were those probation holds too?
No.
They were something else.
Yes.
So this was, you were seeking a benefit here, only joking because you knew it couldn't happen, right?
I was nervous. I was cracking a joke. That's what I do.
Did you say to Lieutenant Barnes and Officer Laporte, you are the only one who knows the information that you're about to provide them?
Yes.
Did you tell Lieutenant Barnes and Officer Laporte that if you were able to communicate with Torgerson, you could get him to tell you where the body was located, right? Did you tell him that?
Something along them lines, yes.
And did you tell the law enforcement officials present that you would tell Torgerson you needed money and it would cost him a certain amount of money for you and him to dig up the body and relocate it before the ground freezes, right? That's what you told law enforcement?
I can't remember.
So, do you remember all talking? How about this? Let me remember this. You indicated you think if you could record your conversation with him, that would be a good idea, right?
Yes.
But you said this conversation could not happen in the jail. You'd have to be out in the community to do it. Do you remember saying that?
I remember implying that we could call him on a phone and do it that way and record it.
So, you never told law enforcement that this couldn't happen in the jail. You'd need to talk to him in the community. That didn't happen?
I said I could not call, but I couldn't call from the front desk and have it say Marathon County Jail and say, hey, let's talk about this. That'd be kind of pointless.
Did you say Spider, that's Torgerson, by the way, right?
Yes.
Would not have this conversation in jail and it would have to take place outside the jail, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was implying by phone.
That you'd stay in the jail and work with law enforcement, right?
Yeah.
But then did you say, Adam advised me if this were to happen, he would prefer to be off of probation when it was over because he wanted to leave with his children, right?
I don't remember that.
Hey, on this first conversation over at Sandy Tim's house, happened about a month before this jail meeting, right? Is that what you said?
Something like that.
Yeah. Do you remember, though, telling Officer Laporte that this alleged meeting actually took place at Keith Kleinschmidt's, Kleinschmidt, his old place? Do you remember that? You said that this
I
meeting
believe-
happened at Kleinschmidt's place?
I believe that I said that Kleinschmidt may have lived at Sandy Tim's house, yes.
Do you remember the address?
It's on Steuben someplace.
Steuben?
Steuben or one of them at South and S, right off of 7th there.
Stark?
Stark.
So Kleinschmidt was just there, it wasn't at his house.
I believe at one point he lived there as well.
But not during that particular date, Kleinschmidt didn't live there.
I'm not sure.
Didn't he, do you remember him living in a place around that time? 620 Kick Bush Street?
I'm not sure.
So, you weren't doing, you didn't have this meeting and cooperate in this matter for any benefit this time, right?
I did it because I'm a father, and if something happened to my kids, I would want to know. And when I got to jail and I finally sobered up and got the dope out of my system, my conscience really kicked in.
That's why you did this.
Yes.
No other reason.
No.
Don't you remember also saying to the police, not only that day, on that day and another day, that the day you talked to the police was a special anniversary? Do you remember that?
No, off the top of my head.
Do you remember telling the police that the day you talked with Officer Max Laporte on October 16, 2011 was special because it was the anniversary of your child's death? Remember saying
Yes.
that? In a traffic accident, right?
Yes.
That was bogus, right? That was a lie.
No.
You had a child die in a traffic accident?
As far as I know, he was my child. DNA wasn't done. He was a young child, 3 months old. If instead of beating around the bush, why don't you just come on and say what you want to say?
This is this. We can't really operate that way. I just want to know. Do you know the name of the child?
Michael Marks.
What is it?
Michael Marks.
LUX?
MARX.
And what county did this? This was a traffic fatality?
Yes.
In what county?
Sheboygan.
And it would have happened on October 16, 1997?
Yes.
So you remember today, that's now you remember that's another reason why you wanted to talk to police.
Like I said, the drug got my system, I sobered up, and my conscience kicked in.
Now you met yet again with law enforcement the next day, right?
I guess so.
You don't remember?
It was 6 years ago. I mean, if the report says I met the next day, I met the next day.
And you remember this time it was with Detective Holtz, who you see at council table,
Yes.
and she was joined by a detective we've already heard from by the name of Buckner. Remember him?
Yes.
You remember again bringing up wanting to do a recording of Torgerson, assisting in that regard? Remember that?
Yeah.
Do you remember telling the detectives on that day that you're going to talk, or you think you can talk to Rebecca Torgerson as well about the case with her?
I don't remember.
Do you remember then, Mr. Smith, about a year going by, and you were visited yet again by Detective Holtz on November 4th, right? Around that time, November 4th, 2011. Remember that?
I don't remember meeting a year later, no.
Okay, so you just remember the two initial meetings?
And November 4th, 2011, for the record, is not a year later.
I'm wrong. Your first meetings were 2011, on October 16th and October 17th, 2011, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I jumped a year. Then 2 weeks later, Detective Holtz came back to see you on November 4, right?
Yes.
Sorry for the confusion. Wasn't meaning to confuse you or anybody else. And do you remember at that point in time saying,
What page are we on? So,
I'm looking at 1014.
that's 14. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's just this business about how you can hopefully figure out other ways to cooperate. You kind of remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And then, you're going to be visited You're not. Then we are going to get into the next year, and you're going to be seen again on February 6, 2012. Remember that?
What page are we on here now? So 1395?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think that's 16.
February 16, 2012. Remember that? Then a few more months passed, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Detective Holtz again, right? With this time a guy named Lieutenant Kolb, K-O-L-B. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And you're going to give more information on that day about what you know about the case, right?
I can't remember.
Okay. Well, do you remember telling Detective Holtz and Lieutenant Kolb that you've been talking to Tyshun Meeks about the case so he can get a benefit? Do you remember that?
Not really, no.
You know who Meeks is, though, right?
Yes, I know who Meeks is.
It's a guy who goes by the name Shake Body, right?
Yes.
Do you remember you making any statements to him about the investigation? In jail?
After I'd talked to the detectives a few times, and he'd just come back from talking to him. He came to talk to me. I can't remember what the conversation was. It was a brief one.
And then you went and talked to the police yourself to give more information, right? Like we said, right? Correct?
Yes.
And you told the police that you believe that Kristopher Torgerson put the body of Stephanie Lowe into a boat and drove it to a footbridge, right?
Yes.
And that footbridge connects to an island, right?
Yes.
And that Torgerson buried the body behind the Rothschild Pavilion on the island, right?
Yes.
He dragged her over. Did he drive on the footbridge or just take his car down?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
But you're telling all this information to Detective Holtz, right?
I'm telling information of a story that was said by Torkelson in the block.
Right. Okay. Let's get that right. So, Mr. DeFore indicated to you, or elicited from you, about this conversation at Sandy Tim's house in which Torgerson made admissions to you, right?
Yes.
But there was more. There was stuff in the jail, right?
Yes.
All right. I want to talk about that.
Okay.
You claim that Torgerson told you that he put Stephanie Lowe's body in a boat, right?
Yes.
And he drove it to a footbridge, right?
Yes.
And that footbridge connects to the Rothschild Pavilion Island, right?
I guess, yes.
Now, I'm asking you what Torgerson told you because that's what you told Detective Holtz.
I don't remember him saying where the bridge connected to.
Okay. Well, did you talk to Detective Holtz that Torgerson told you about a pavilion on an island?
Yes.
All right. And did you tell Detective, and this is all coming from Torgerson, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you told Detective Holtz that Torgerson dragged Stephanie Lowe over the footbridge, dragged her over a tarp and buried her right behind the pavilion on the little island, right?
Yes.
And then Torgerson said he wanted to move the body now because Andrea Wadinsky lives nearby that island, right?
Yes.
And he also told you that you claim that Torgerson told you, and you relayed to Detective Holtz, that the reason for the murder was that when he was arrested, Stephanie Lowe had closed up shop and refused to sell drugs, right?
Yes.
And you claim that Torgerson told you, because this is what you told Detective Holtz, that she was a doper, she was trying to keep it all for herself, and we had to pay a debt, right?
Yes.
And then you told Detective Holtz, you looked her in the eye and said, you also told me, Torgerson did, that Stephanie can brawl like a man, but he got the safe anyway, right?
Yes.
On a number of occasions, Mr. Smith, you have lied to law enforcement, haven't you?
Yes.
On a number of occasions, Mr. Smith, while under probation supervision, you have lied to your supervising probation agent.
Yes.
I have nothing to.
Before I do redirect, I think we need to have a conversation off the record, or not off the record, outside the presence of the jury.
Okay. Let's choose the jury.
Sit.
The council has gone into the specifics of the later statement that the defendant made to Mr. Smith in the jail, which we intentionally did not cover on direct examination. This information that the defendant gave him about burying the body on an island by the pavilion. It's the state's position that that information was intentionally given to Mr. Smith falsely to attempt to determine if he was a snitch. And that's based upon incident that occurred in late October or early November of 2011, where the defendant, and this is the reason why we're bringing this up now, where the defendant attacked Mr. Smith in the jail, choking him and striking him while accusing him of being a snitch, because the only person that knew things was him, and that had resulted, he had to have snitched because he was his, as he describes it, baby mama, which would be Ms. Wodinski, was interviewed about the case, about the Stephanie Lowe case, and that Mr. Smith must have disclosed this information to law enforcement because he was the only one who knew. So we believe that this cross-examination makes that information relevant and admissible to show the purpose behind the defendant providing him intentionally false information that he would expect, if he is in fact a snitch, would be repeated to law enforcement, and he could determine for sure that the defendant is the snitch.
I don't think this witness can testify to all of that, all the conclusions from that, but he can certainly testify if he's been battered by Mr. Torgerson. I think.
Mr. Dukor?
That's fine, then we intend to cover that, and no, he can't testify that that's the reason. That is an inference that we will ask the jury to draw from that testimony, but no, I agree, he can't testify to it, I'm just was explaining the reason why it was relevant.
Okay, it is relevant.
Okay,
Agreed.
thank you.
May be seated. Stop.
Yes, sir.
Adam, you were asked on cross-examination about this statement that the defendant made about the body being buried in a pavilion near Rochelle. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
That took place when you and the defendant were both in the jail, correct?
Yes.
Prior to that, had the defendant confronted you about being a snitch?
Yes.
And where did that take place?
In the bathroom
All right, you want to just move forward?
in the bathroom in the M block in Marathon County Jail.
N or M?
M.
Did he physically attack you during that confrontation?
Yes, he did.
And did he tell you why he believed you were the snitch?
Because the cops knew information that only I knew.
And did he
I'm
say
sorry,
how
Mr. Ford, I didn't hear the answer.
The cops knew information that only I knew.
and did he tell you how the cops knew that information, or why he believed the cops knew that information?
Because I was a snitch.
No, but did he tell you how he knew that the cops knew information that you had provided?
Well, I guess that would be his
Yeah,
choice. I object.
I'm not sure.
I'll withdraw it.
All right, that's fine. Did he say anything to you, did the defendant say anything to you about his, quote, baby mama, close quote?
I can't remember the full conversation.
All right, that's fine. Now, let's go back to your initial conversation with Lieutenant Barnes and Officer Laporte. And you had said something about getting the probation hold dropped. And they told you clearly, whether it was joking or not joking, that they couldn't do that, correct?
Correct.
And you told them, I'll tell you what I know no matter what, correct?
Yes.
And you did, correct?
Yes.
And counsel asked you about times that you lied to the police in the past. Have those been occasions where you've been trying to avoid getting in trouble?
Yes.
And how about the times when you lied to your probation and parole agent? Same thing?
So I don't know anybody who tells the truth to their agent. I mean, it's if you're going to jail, you try to lie to stay out. I mean, I lied to my peer on several occasions. No, I wasn't in the bar. No, I wasn't drinking. And I still held alcohol in my breath. You know what I mean?
All right. Have you been telling us the truth here today?
Yes, I have.
What you've told us is what the defendant told you.
Yes.
Have you got any consideration, any benefit from what you provided, the information you provided to law enforcement?
No, so
Have you asked for any outside of the one time when you said something about getting a probation hold dropped that you knew never could happen? No further questions.
Let me make sure I get this right. You know the criminal justice system. You understand, apparently, the probation system pretty well, right?
yes,
And you understand that probation is a sentence as opposed to being in prison, right?
extended supervision
Yes.
is a sentence instead of
I
being in
guess, Your Honor,
prison.
I'm going to object to this as being beyond the scope of my redirect.
He talked about that everybody lies to their probation officers. I'd like to explore that.
Okay, the question you asked is not actually correct, the way you're describing it. So,
I don't mean to mistake the law. May I rephrase it?
you can try, yes.
Okay. People would rather be put on probation than go to prison, right?
Yes,
When you're on probation, you're under the supervision of a probation officer, right?
yes,
It's an official probation officer of the state of Wisconsin, correct?
yes,
And it's your testimony. Today, everybody lies to those state agents who are on probation, right?
yes. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that I've done it.
I have no further questions in this witness.
Anything else, Mr.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Your Excuse.
Judge, we need to talk to our next witness briefly before he comes on.
Okay, why don't we take about a 10-minute break and come back?
Also, Judge, this is one that I think that Attorney Wilmoth, did you want to go forward without commenting on numbers of anything? Or?
No, I need to do that.
Okay, so this might be a little longer.
Okay, the longer break for the jury.